One of the most prominent features in Escape from Tarkov is the complex weapon modding. This extremely detailed system allows you to experiment with a wide variety of available attachments and fit your gun to fulfill the desired role. Welcome to Gun Nut.
Мы на месте.
To reiterate a sentence from the previous episode, one of the most recognizable, ubiquitous, elegantly designed and reliable weapons that has ever graced the battlefield. In today's episode, the SA58. Known as a signature firearm of the NATO forces, and as the right arm of the free world. Because of that, many people consider the FN FAL to be the first world rifle, which is a bit unfair since it is also one of the most prominently used rifles across all battlefields in the previous century, and therefore, in history. We are in the big leagues now, both in terms of popularity and caliber. The FAL has a lot of product variants, but we will predominantly focus on the model that serves as one of the most popular weapons in our beloved Norvinsk region, the DSA FAL, or more specifically, an OSW subcategory of the gun, which is found in the game under the basic moniker of SA58. If this sounds like a bunch of abbreviations mixed into a jumbled mess, don't worry. There is a lot to unpack here, but it also indicates the rich and intriguing history of this seasoned battle rifle. The original gun has been designed and assembled in National Factory Herstal, the renowned Belgian manufacturer located in the municipality of Herstal, Belgium, hence the shortened FN in front of the gun's initials. As French is the official language of Belgium, the rifle's designated nickname FAL roughly stands for Light Automatic Rifle. On some conspicuous Slavic battlefields, the gun was embraced and beloved for its robustness and reliability, so it was henceforth nicknamed Falovka, which sounds kinda endearing if you think about it. DSA FAL model originated in an American company, David Salvaggio Arms, and it was built according to the same method and production line equipment used to create the STG-58. STG-58 is a selective fire FN FAL variant, manufactured under license by the Steyr Daimler Puch Defense Company from Steyr, Austria. This is exactly why this specific, American-made model is also known under the codename of DSA58. This overly contrived name game puzzle will come back into play later. The STG-58, or the Austrian variant, is available for purchase from Level 2 Peacekeeper. And although it is currently only available from a trade for 5 flash drives, this might be changed in the future. The trade itself, however, is far from impossible for the level it becomes available at, considering the weapon's stopping power and how soon you can get your hands on this beauty. As soon as you meet the requirements for Peacekeeper Level 3, you can purchase the Belgian FAL for $895, or just above 86,000 rubles. Both the Austrian and Belgian variants have the same overall performance, with the recoil stat of 262, and the differences being the stock and the handguard, slightly better ergonomic stat of the Austrian variant, and the magazine sizes. The FAL is a heavy hitter. In line with this, it's not unusual that you will need some time to get used to the high recoil pattern. To that end, Factory or any other arena type map is the perfect choice for practice. The Operation Specialist weapon, or the OSW variant, unlocks the Level 4 Peacekeeper. With a price tag of around $1,000 and the recoil stat of 338, don't expect too much of this weapon without further adjustments. The 16-inch barrel of this variant is its biggest drawback. Of course, it's possible to replace it with a 21-inch, but if you simply want to build a FAL with the lowest possible recoil from the ground up, it's always a better choice to buy the Belgian variant and just go from there. However, if you simply want to make the best out of this particular variant, you will need the Austrian-style muzzle brake, cast VFAS handguard with either an RVG or the SE5 Express grip in the SPR stock. The current setup will lower the recoil stat to 275, which is still pretty high, yet good enough for close-quarter engagements. Apart from the Magpul original stock that it comes with, you can also attach other stocks using the SA58 buffer tube adapter like the eMod, Gen 2, or the good old PDW. A very similar setup can also be acquired from Level 3 Mechanic for 1 Bitcoin. Although the 50-round drum magazine is useful to have, the trade for this alone is not worth the Bitcoin, as you can acquire the drum magazine from level 4 mechanic for a single G-phone. The final variant of the SA58 you can buy is the PBR, available from level 4 mechanic. This setup will cost you around 170,000 rubles and comes with a hybrid silencer and a PRS-2 polymer stock. It's a good choice for stealthy mid to long range engagements, but if you simply want to use it as a DMR and without additional tuning, bring a secondary weapon just in case. Now, why would an operator want this piece of weaponry at his side in the field? It is a hard-hitting weapon that gets the job done and is much more accurate than it looks, but its handling in the active battlefield comes with a caveat. Use a suppressor because this gun is loud enough to wake the dead. Otherwise, you can expect every scab and his cat to come raining down on you like hellfire in a blink of an eye. Still, it is an extremely reliable weapon which can be used for distant targets in semi-automatic mode, and it comes with a mountain of attachments, which leaves you with a palette of choices to liberally mold the weapon that suits you. In other words, it is a perfect utilitarian military weapon that looks good, handles well, and gets the highest marks for its ergonomics. And let's be honest, when it comes to the design of the original framework, its simplicity echoes tasteful minimalism and practicality, while its elongated lines and original black coloring add a touch of elegance to the weapon. To someone who likes texture and garish details, this might look a bit Spartan, but there is definitely exquisiteness to be found in well-designed, stylistic frugality. By the time it was widely used by NATO in over 90 countries around the world, it was almost certainly one of the most beautifully designed mass-produced firearms in the world. The latest versions of the FAL came with a laundry list of obligatory tweaks which came about due to the ever-shifting standards in the firearm industry. Still, its framework and contours have been kept surprisingly consistent over the decades. Due to the battle rifle's timeless design, many gun wielders are left speechless once they learn how far back through the corridors of modern history they have to go in order to learn about the DSA 58's origin. In a way, the work on the original FAL began even before the beginning of World War II. FN FAL wanted to create a self-loading semi-automatic battle rifle as the arms race wound up, but the company was promptly hindered in its efforts after Belgium got occupied by the Nazis. The blueprints were there, but the practical part of the work had to wait for nearly a decade. After the end of the war, the ceasefire spread across Europe, but the arms race never stopped, a trend that would push the world towards the precipice of destruction once more in the form of Cold War. Based on previous blueprints and ideas, a prototype of the FN FAL was assembled in 1946. It was designed by Dieudonné Sèvres and Ernest Verviers with an idea to create a modern weapon which would fire 7.92 by 33mm Kurz cartridge, developed and used during the war for STG-44. After some back and forth between the British Army and FN FAL in regards to caliber and technical minutiae, as well as standardization issues between the US and the UK, the gun known as the FN FAL was embraced as NATO's Golden Battle Rifle standard. As much as it can be gathered, its .30 light rifle cartridge was the point of contention, but the negotiations were successful, and this cartridge was later also standardized by NATO as 7.62 by 51mm. After all of the regulatory squabbling, the FN FAL was introduced to the world in 1951 by its duo of proud designers. For all of you interested in a bit of trivia, FAL's Warsaw Pact counterpart is none other than the good old-fashioned Woodstock AKM, which explains why these two specific guns sometimes get offered as variations on functionally the same primary battle rifle for the opposing forces in many video games. Now, in order to understand which exact variant of this gun was introduced to Tarkov, we need to go back to the name game. As it has been mentioned before, DSA FAL or SA58 was developed by the US company, and its letter abbreviation comes from the company's name. Its story begins around 30 years ago. David Salvaggio founded his weapons manufacturing business, DS Arms, and started to import piles upon piles of FALs, especially Steyr STG-58, which were produced in Austria. Thankfully, he was also fortunate enough to acquire the tools and blueprints used to make this gun, and so he started tweaking and tinkering with the original designs, trying to reinforce the gun in terms of design. He almost certainly couldn't have imagined that his final product would change the landscape of the American arms production and have such a profound impact on the industry as a whole. Since David Salvaggio's battle rifle was created by using the same product line equipment used to assemble the STG-58, the German abbreviation is simply replaced by the company's initials. Simple as that. Now, the two versions of the DSA-58 were introduced to the market. the DSA 58 OSW or Operational Specialist Weapon, and the DSA 58 CTC or Compact Tactical Carbine. The first one is the assault weapon, while the second one is a tactical variant. The assault version found in Tarkov is a legal copy of the SA58 OSW added in patch 0.9. It comes with a marked innovation in form of the zero movement scope mount, which can accommodate your regular Weaver type mounting system, but which can also be easily removed according to one's needs. And it looks like the developers also wanted to simplify things when it comes to overly complicated names and abbreviations, which is ultimately a smart decision. For example, since the DSA 58 is nearly identical to the original Austrian STG, it has been added to the game and made distinct from the American-made version by simply being called the SA 58 AUS and SA 58 BEL. There is actually a very simple answer as to why FAL subcategories and variants are such a convoluted melting pot of names and tags. Everybody wanted to get their greasy fingers all over this sleek battle rifle, and so the production was diversified and spread around the world. Many companies in different corners of the globe added their own tweaks and changes to the gun, introducing their own proudly named variants into the fold. The foundation, or the trunk of this production tree, was definitely the FN FAL, which subsequently branched out into 15 different directions, and 15 different arms companies in states such as US, UK, Austria, Canada, Israel, Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil to name a few. Many of these countries adopted the FN FAL as a standard military weapon of their armed forces. Some of the models produced in these countries decades ago are actually still in use, like in the case of the Greek Coast Guard. Now, to make the SA58 as reliable as possible in both CQB and some longer range engagements, the stock version will need some tuning. The 21-inch barrel reduces the recoil by 12% and can be bought separately from level 4 mechanic. Currently, the best handguard for further recoil reduction is the Voltorcast V, with extra recoil reduction and allowing you to attach a foregrip, preferably the RBG or the SC5. As pistol grips only affect the ergonomics, something like the Fab Defense AG grip will be a good choice. The SPR polymer stock reduces the recoil by an additional 43% and is, like almost all other parts from this particular build, sold by level 4 mechanic. The Extreme Duty dust cover allows for installation of long-range optics or simply a red dot sight, and it is, ergonomically speaking, more useful than to attach it on the handguard. The final piece of the puzzle is the Austrian-style muzzle brake. The complete setup features the recoil stat of 194, which is more than enough to efficiently take down your opponents with some classic spray and pray. The downside, however, is that you will have to go in loud. The SA58 features an extremely loud and distinct firing sound, so shoot once and you will have rang the dinner bell for all kids in the block. The aforementioned setup with a recoil stat of 194, albeit the lowest possible, is not your only option for effective gameplay. Depending on how well you're used to the recoil pattern of the SA58, as well as your preferred style of play, you may also want to experiment with something like this. A reliable choice for CQB scenarios, and more than enough to get the job done. The SA58 is chambered in 7.62x51, and there are currently 3 different variants of this round in Escape from Tarkov. Although for some weapons it is far more important to use certain ammo types and thus reduce the time to kill, it is safe to say that you won't have any trouble dispatching enemies no matter which one of the 3 ammo types you use. The M80 cartridge is sold by Peacekeeper level 2, as well as Kier at level 3, and is the cheapest of the 3 available types. And unlike the M62 and M61, it is not walled off by a specific quest, whereas the M62 unlocks after completing Spot Tour Part 6, and the M61 after reaching level 7 with your sniper skill and finishing the quest Wet Job Part 6. The damage value of 68 puts it in second place, but the penetration value of 50, as well as the armor damage ratio of 49%, indicate that this particular round might not be the best choice. However, only on paper. While both the M62 and M61 have higher stats and have more penetrating power, they are not as easily accessible as the M80. And all things considered, it's 7.62x51 after all. The biggest difference between these rounds can be felt when shooting in semi-automatic mode, thus being able to tell approximately how many rounds it took to dispatch an opponent. In other words, when going for body shots against a heavily armored target, the M61 will, without a doubt, show the best performance. However, in a bit more hectic CQB situations, you can also go with the M80. Flip that full auto switch and go ham. The design details and the ergonomics further corroborate why the FAL is so popular. To be more specific, the DSA SA58 OSW parastock rifle is a fairly lightweight assault weapon considering its size. It boasts a gas-operated system which is driven by a short-stroke spring-loaded piston which is located right above the barrel. This means that, through some light tuning, recoil should be relatively light in practice. However, this is not the case in Escape from Tarkov. The initial kick of the FAL is very high, and with recoil lower than 300, it can still be pretty hard to control the weapon when firing in fully automatic mode while aiming down sight, from a crouched position. Considering it is a high-caliber, selective-fire battle rifle, it will take some time before you get used to the FAL, and without proper tuning, things do tend to get a bit complicated in fully automatic mode. This is why it is advisable to work on the recoil reduction if you want to end up clutching to what might just be the ideal battle rifle. The magazine sizes in the game vary from 10, 20, 30, and 50 rounds, and it can fire at a rate of 750 rounds per minute. With no bullets left in the chamber, it takes 3.14 seconds to reload, while tactical reload takes 3 seconds. And finally, fast reloading and dropping your magazine on the ground takes 2.15 seconds. When it comes to practical usage in larger conflicts, the FN FAL and its many variations were used on pretty much every battlefield around the globe since the end of the Second World War. The Argentinian FALs were on the front lines during the Falklands Wars, in Cyprus, and in a particularly volatile Slavic powder keg known as the Balkans. The FALs produced in Israel were used during the Suez Crisis in 1957, during the Six-Day War in 1967, the War of Attrition from 67 to 70, and the Yom Kippur War in 1973. However, the usage of Israeli FALs in the desert areas which are plagued by dust storms has been the source of great frustration. The gun was prone to jamming due to sand ingress. Though to be perfectly fair, many automatic and semi-automatic guns produced during that time would not have fared better, and even seasoned FALs maintained in proper shape should work quite well in continental areas and other parts of the world where heavy dust clouds do not present a hindrance. FALs were also used during the Rhodesian Bush War, which lasted for a whopping 15 years, from 1964 to 1979. If you've never heard of this country, or the conflict that consequently ended its tentative existence, nobody blames you. Rhodesia used to be a successor state to the British colony of South Rhodesia and equivalent in shape, size, and practice to today's state of Zimbabwe. FALs with customized flash suppressors for recoil reduction were given to Rhodesian security forces who were trained to use a semi-automatic setting in open combat. While it's hard to say whether the military personnel adhere to this, since many complained that the weapon was useless in this mode when push comes to shove in close combat, it is noteworthy to point out that the FAL actually showed better performance than SKSs and Kalashnikovs in Rhodesian battlefield. Rhodesian civil conflict pitted 3 sides against each other, and it resolved in a peace treaty and creation of Zimbabwe. FAL was also used throughout the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, during the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Congo crisis, as well as the Iraqi conflict, Libyan, and Syrian civil war. As the list of prominent battlefields goes on, it becomes quite glaringly obvious that there was not one conflict, event, or a crisis that popularized the FAL as a gun. The sheer number of units produced, its ubiquity and reliability in the field, as well as its reputation as the right arm of the free world beneath the NATO's banner, all of these factors contributed to turning the FN FAL into a sort of the archetypal automatic rifle of the 20th century. The SA58 is an excellent all-around weapon. Along with all of its numerous variations, it appears to be one of those guns that seemingly gets reinvented and, with a new gust of wind in the back, gets a new lease on life with every new iteration. Designed as a sturdy military battle rifle with sparse but elegant looks, it stands the test of time and constantly becomes reaffirmed as one of the best pieces of primary weaponry to date. This can also be seen through games like Escape from Tarkov, or if you will, the gaming landscape in general. The impact of the FN FAL's derivatives on pop culture is practically impossible to measure. It is not a curiosity that springs up here and there like a cult weapon rarely anyone uses. It is an ever-present option in countless single-player and most multiplayer games in a modern setting. Is it still in production? Absolutely. And will be, in some shape or form, for decades to come. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.